Hello, hello, hello. I'm Melanie Little, and welcome to my channel. If you are a regular subscriber, thank you so much for joining me. And if you are new here, welcome. I am a recovering lawyer. I have been a New York State licensed attorney for over 30 years, specializing in primarily civil litigation. I'm also a mother of 5, frequent legal commentator and analyst on 2 true crime podcasts, Duty Ron and Police Off the Cuff. I wanted to jump on here tonight and talk about the wrongful death settlement that's just been reached in the case of the estate of Mallory Beach versus Parker's and the Murdaughs. I watched a motion hearing on Friday in Hampton County, South Carolina, that concerned me because there was a lot of misinformation in the chat. And so I wanted to come on and clarify some things because I am a civil litigator. I've been a civil litigator for many, many years, and this is exactly what I do. So just for a little bit of background on this, Mallory Beach was tragically killed in a boating accident in February of 2019. The boat was driven by Paul Murdaugh, who you may recall was the son of Alex and Maggie Murdaugh. Alex Murdaugh was convicted of murdering both Paul and Maggie on June 7th of 2021, and he is currently spending time in prison. The estate of Mallory Beach, which is technically her mom, who was appointed representative of her estate, is represented by an attorney by the name of Mark Tinsley. And they brought a lawsuit in Hampton County, South Carolina, against Parker's, which is the convenience store where Paul, who was only 19 years of age at the time and underage in the state of South Carolina, used his brother Buster's ID to buy alcohol and became intoxicated. In fact, after the accident, his blood alcohol level was tested and he was found to be almost 3 times the legal limit. In this lawsuit, Paul was the named defendant. Parker's, who is the convenience store that sold him alcohol, is also a named defendant, as were Alex and Maggie Murdaugh as the owners of the boat that Paul was driving. The misinformation that I was watching in the chat on Friday during the motions hearing was that a lot of people were concerned because they thought that Paul and Maggie were being sued. Alex and Maggie were being sued as being vicariously liable as the parents of Paul for his actions. That is not the case here. The case is, and the law says, that they can be sued as the owners of the boat for negligently allowing their son to drive that boat. So it is similar to a case where if I own a vehicle and I allow someone else to drive it, including one of my children, if they are in an accident with my vehicle, I am also sued as the owner of the car. And that is how it is in every personal injury case. The owner of the vehicle is also sued in addition to the driver. Now, what was going on Friday was that the attorneys for Parker's were arguing 2 things. Number one, they were arguing that the case should be moved out of Hampton County because there was no way that their corporate client defendant was going to be able to receive a fair civil trial in Hampton County because the Murdaughs were so well known there, and that they felt that their client was going to be punished because of the public dislike of Alex Murdaugh. What I also found really interesting was that the courtroom that this motion was heard in had portraits hanging on the wall of Alex's father, grandfather, and I believe great-grandfather right there in the courtroom. That's how influential the Murdaugh family was in Hampton County, South Carolina. That was the first motion. The second motion was that Parker's was asking the court to sever their case from the case that was still remaining against Alex Murdaugh. And the reason for that is that in South Carolina, they have something called joint and several liability, which means that a jury will decide which percentage of fault each defendant in a case is. And if they are two defendants, whatever percentage of liability the defendant is found to be liable would be the percentage that they would have to pay. So for example, if there are two defendants in a lawsuit and a jury comes in with a finding of liability, 50% against one defendant, 50% against the second defendant, and they issue a verdict of $1 million. Because they're found 50-50 liable, each defendant would be required to pay $500,000. If the jury came back with a verdict that defendant A is 30% liable and defendant B is 70% liable, they would split the verdict accordingly. $700,000 to the 70% defendant, $300,000 to the 30% defendant. However, joint and several liability does not apply when the case involves sale of alcohol. So what that means is that if Parker's was found to be even 1% liable, they would be on the hook to pay the entire verdict amount. So if a jury came back with a verdict of $10 million and Parker's was only found to be 1% liable for this accident, for selling underage Paul the alcohol that he used his brother's ID to buy, and they found Alex Murdaugh to be 99% liable for allowing Paul to use his boat because he knew or should have known that he would be intoxicated because Paul had a history of driving while intoxicated. Parker's would be on the hook to pay the entire verdict, even if they were only found 1% at fault. So on Friday, after oral argument, obviously Mark Tinsley argued on behalf of the family, Mallory's family, that the case should not be moved out of Hampton County because they could absolutely find a jury that wasn't familiar with the Murdaughs or would not be swayed by any influence the Murdaughs may or may not have. And number two, that the cases should not be severed because it involves the same subject matter, and he argued there was no reason to sever the cases. Now, he also argued, Mark Tinsley, that the estate of Paul Murdaugh, which was also a defendant, and the estate of Maggie Murdaugh, which is also a defendant, should be released from the case. He wanted the case against them dismissed because he obviously didn't want to muddy the waters, and he wanted a clean case against Alec and against Parker's. Parker's is the deep pocket here, obviously, because they have insurance, and Alec may not be solvent. I don't know what his financial condition is at the current time, but any judgment against Alec may not be collectible. The judge ruled on Friday that number one, the case would not be moved from Hampton County, and number two, the case would not be severed. The cases would not be severed. They would remain joint defendants. Therefore, it was just announced today that Parker's is paying $15 million to the estate of Mallory Beach to settle this lawsuit. And I believe that it was a result of the motions hearing on Friday, that they had no choice, that they really did not want to risk a jury verdict in this case. The trial is scheduled for August, and that they just wanted to get rid of this case. They also settled, there were two other cases against Parker's as well for two passengers on the boat, Connor Cook and Anthony Cook. They settled each of those cases for $1 million each. So what is interesting here is that yes, it's a great deal of money, $15 million, but there is no amount of money that can replace your child. There is just no amount of money that would be enough. But settling the case for this large of a sum sends a message. And it sends a message that they took this case very seriously. They did not want to risk a jury verdict in this case. And it also sends a message to convenience stores and other places that sell alcohol to minors to be very careful and to beware and to make sure that the person's ID that you're checking is valid and it's accurate and it really belongs to the person, because law enforcement is cracking down all the time on convenience stores that sell alcohol to minors, as well they should. Parker's was also risking a potential award of punitive damages that could have far exceeded what they agreed to settle this case for. It looks like the case may have been mediated. I'm not quite sure. There's some conflicting reports because this is just very new news. So it looks like the case against Alex Murdaugh, which would be the only remaining defendant, is scheduled to go to trial on August 14th. I don't know if they're going to discontinue against Alex. I don't think they have any reason to. So my feeling is that they will try the case against Alex in August, and you can expect probably a very large verdict in that case as well. Whether it will be collectible or not, I'm not really sure, but we will see what happens with that case, and I will be following it for you, and I will report back at a later date. Thanks for watching. I'm happy I could update you on this, and if you have any questions, please leave them below in the comments. I love to read your comments, and I love to respond to them, but please be respectful in the comments and no personal attacks against either me or each other, and guide your actions accordingly. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.